Mercedes with a huge moment to highlight the win by George Russell this Sunday. His victory alongside Kimi Antonelli, pulling off a late pass on Charles Leclerc to pull both silver arrows ahead of the Scuderia. Mercedes propelled ahead in the constructors by 27 points. George Russell dominated. And look, I'm the resident Mercedes fan on this podcast. It's not a secret, but I was incredibly impressed. And I think a lot of the F1 world is incredibly impressed by what Mercedes were really able to do this weekend. Starting the weekend, Mercedes seemed like they'd been caught out. Slow practice sessions. But by qualifying Saturday, it looked like they had figured it out. They went from circling the back end, the midfield, to, hey, we might have something here. We might have something here. You know, a little P3, P4 finish in FP3 to turn into a pole position with a hell of a lap by George Russell to break the single lap record around the newest configuration of Singapore, the all-time lap record still. And then he broke it again with his second lap in Q3. And then once the green waved its way on Sunday, Russell went lights to flag to secure his 5th Grand Prix win in his career, the 2nd of this season, alongside the Canadian Grand Prix, where he did the exact same thing, going lights to flag, keeping Max Verstappen and Lando Norris behind at about an arm's length. And you could argue this win was just as dominant as his Canadian Grand Prix win. Russell solidified himself this year, and arguably over the next few years maybe, as one of the grid's best, but especially this season, is lining himself up for quite the contract extension, with a lot of conversation being had so far this year about when is this contract going to get done? When is Mercedes going to put pen to paper with George Russell? And Toto Wolff addressed that during this Grand Prix weekend, as reportedly said the contract is fixed, quote unquote, and they're just working out the finer details, speaking to German media, and that the details for both drivers are going to be announced soon enough. I can't imagine that we're going to go into the offseason and there hasn't been an official announcement, at least for both drivers. But speaking of Kimi Antonelli, the kid showed up after a rough start to lose a couple of places off the racing line, starting P4. He still finished P5 after dropping back to P6. And for some much-needed points as well for Mercedes. I've said time and time again that Mercedes really needed Kimi Antonelli to really step up for them if this was going to be a true competition for P2 in the Constructors Championship, fighting against Ferrari. Again, 27-point margin created by Russell, by Antonelli this past weekend. And he's earned back-to-back top 5 finishes, some added confidence results-wise for the kid as well. So a really standout weekend for Mercedes from beginning to end, really. And the question being, for me anyway, have Ferrari missed their chance for P2 in the Constructors? Because Lewis has not gained an inch of confidence in this car since his sprint win in China, arguably the worst personal weekend of his in quite a long time, I can imagine. Obviously losing his beloved dog, Roscoe Hamilton. Condolences sending the way of Lewis Hamilton and company. But as far as what was happening on track, feature race, braking failure leading him to corner cutting, and then with post-race penalty being dropped down to P8, Fernando Alonso taking P7. Charles driving the car on a knife's edge, managed to still salvage a P6, but was passed on the inside by Kimi Antonelli on a very daring pass after watching the back end of the Ferrari, staring at that HB logo for God knows how many laps. Late into the race, Kimi Antonelli pulling a deep move up the inside into the later, I want to say sector 3, I want to say it was turn 13 or 14. But yeah, Kimi seeming to get his groove back within this race weekend as well. And both teams have already turned towards development emphasis on 2026. I don't see it from Ferrari's side. Charles Leclerc post-race talking about how Ferrari don't have any planned upgrades in the works for the final 6 races of the Grand Prix schedule for the championship. How for him in his fight for P2, for Ferrari's fight for P2, he doesn't quite see it either. I don't think that Charles has the confidence. Obviously, Lewis has lacked confidence for a majority of the season. The question being asked, is this championship fight over as far as the guys who are running up behind McLaren at this stage of the championship? If Kimi Antonelli continues to have great weekends like this, top 5 finishes, top 6 even, I mean, yeah, by all intents and purposes, I don't see the Ferraris catching George Russell week in, week out, unless something happens, which George Russell, alongside Lance Stroll of all people, no DNFs so far this season. So I think Ferrari are probably at this stage now where they really have invested a lot into just getting 2026 off to the right start. Reports of them going for an ambitious approach could be, sending off some alarms to some people, to some members of the Tifosi. But Mercedes are back to displaying arguably the second fastest car on the grid. Early stages of the year, the first third of the season, they were the second fastest, pretty undeniably, and capable of catching McLaren at this stage of the season any given weekend. Since, I don't know, I'm trying to think about results-wise, 2025. Let's take a look here. As far as the entire season, since the summer break, it has not been a slam dunk obvious, result that it's going to go McLaren's way. The Netherlands went to Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris had that DNF, but in Italy it was Max Verstappen. In Baku, it was Max Verstappen. And now Singapore, George Russell. I want to say that's the longest stretch of the year so far where we have not seen McLaren on the top step. As far as the championship for McLaren is concerned, Mercedes are becoming kind of a factor as, for Lando Norris, for Oscar Piastri. George Russell's having a hell of a season. Max Verstappen, you can never count him out. So, yeah, as far as P2, though, I don't think that Ferrari are going to do much more than maybe sniff podiums the rest of the season. And I think that they just feel very comfortably behind. It seems like all the sentiment coming out of Ferrari is, we're phoning it in. Just ready to get to the end of the year. It's been a disappointing result. And obviously for Ferrari, not winning a championship, not competing for championships is a disappointing season. Historically, currently, etc., not winning a championship is a disappointment for Ferrari. When, they've been in the sport the longest. They are the most recognizable team on this grid. But at the end of the day, right now they're competing for P2. And to them, I think that they could care less for it. I want to know what you guys think, though. TLP's down in the comments below. Do you think P2 in the Constructors Championship is already around? I have a feeling maybe that Ferrari will become the fourth constructor to finally win a race this season. So far, winless on the year, outside of the sprint format anyway. Is there enough in there? Could we see a podium from Lewis Hamilton, who has yet to find one in a feature race? Charles has 5, if I'm not mistaken, 5 to 6. Did Charles break through? Let me know down in the comments below. Is this thing donezo? Is it a wrap? I want to know what the TLPs think. What are your impressions of Ferrari? Do you even have hope for them in 2026 with their self-imposed approach? Do we think that Ferrari have something cooking that maybe they're going to be ahead of the rest of the grid? A lot of the emphasis is going into 2026, their engine. McLaren obviously going to be driving the same power unit. Aston Martin moving into Honda. Red Bull, questions about them being a factor. But how do you guys feel about Ferrari? Do you feel confident? Do you feel dissuaded? I want to know.